King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts. There's a definite Twitter storm surrounding Dave Chappelle, the beloved and heralded comedian, for some, maybe not others, and his newest Netflix special, his final Netflix special, The Closer. We're going to talk about that and the issues surrounding it because of the fact that for anyone these days that wants to be in entertainment or be a public figure, that there is such a scrutiny, which is created by social media quite a bit. And, well, it's fueled and it's accelerated by social media. But then we have groups that are out there that are very much a vocal minority. And they get the chance to speak up. And because the mass media decides to prop them up so much, then they're allowed to have that voice. Now, I'm not here to go ahead and put any kind of context as to what it would be or try to defend or, go after Dave Chappelle. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to analyze the situation. Again, this is an apolitical program, the Broadcasters Podcast, and this is episode 195. Thanks for being here. And as I do this new format, where I have been bringing more mainstream content into the start of every show, it's been a better change because I get to see, and I really get to go and find out when we eventually get to the behind the scenes stuff, the business type of stuff, to get into what people actually care about and what is focus every week. It's so different every week, and there's a controversy, there's praise, there's so much. But we know that the media out there, they can really relish on negativity. Like journalism, whether it's for celebrities, whether it's for news, whether it's for politics, they want to bring you through the whole cadre of senses and emotions. That's what they want you to do. And so the outrage card being played here on Dave Chappelle, whether it's for good or not, I will say this. I watched the special just before I got on earlier tonight. I wanted to see what it was. My personal take is, look, it's tough to find a good comedy special for me because I am spoiled with great comedy from years gone. And there's not a lot of new comedians I go and look for all of a sudden and just really stand out. And I'll say that maybe some of my choices are not going to be like what everybody else's choices are. When I have to think about who would I go see at a concert, or go watch stand-up of, like, give me a Robert Schimmel, give me a Pablo Francisco, I guess you could say Sam Kinison back in the day. If I had to give somebody else current, like I wouldn't go see Bill Burr. I wouldn't go see Joe Rogan. I mean, yeah, if I get the tickets, sure, but I'm not paying for them. Just because there's a certain level of the comedy that I really have to have somebody that's really just going to go over the top and make me just fall over. Now, Dave Chappelle, right off the bat, his earlier material in the first couple of minutes, it got me laughing. And he got me laughing probably about 6 or 7 times throughout the hour-long show. After that, it was just amusement. Not so much a ha-ha, but just using his platform to really talk about things where he feels like he's been wrongly, not wrongly accused, just wrongly castigated. To be criticized, well, he's got a big target on himself. Anybody who's a popular and successful comedian is that. Kevin Hart has been that. Chris Rock has also been that. But think about this too. I mean, Dave Chappelle's 48 years old. He's on the veteran adult end of he's on the veteran side of the comedians. We've seen him in some way, shape, or form for 25 years plus. I mean, you can't say much more. Like he's been around for a long time, and so he's not going to get canceled. And then some of the other comedians that are out there that have worked themselves really well, Jon Stewart or Bill Maher or Jerry Seinfeld, they have been around for a long time, and they're still doing their work. They're going on the road, but I mean, there's others that have decided to go off the road and, they're not out there anymore. But, yeah, I understand there has to be this need to go after people. But what Dave Chappelle does and what many other comedians do of the old guard, without saying who I think is or not, and without trying to think who they are. I will say one thing. I think some of the comedians that are getting really beat up and consistently getting gone after for whatever reason, they have something that I like to say. It's the 4-letter acronym. Don't give a fuck. DGAF. And they absolutely fit that description. Because you have to be that way. As a trained comedian that you've gone out and done stand-up, working with the bests, okay? Work at the Comedy Store, work in the Improv, doing whatever. You have comedians that got to be able to go and tell jokes without any barriers. And comedy does not work in this new society, in this new age of appropriation of culture, of race, and people having sensitivities, and people feeling that everyone should be, there's certain people that should be successful, or that everybody should have a chance to be successful and be participating in the conversation, being able to go and, be acknowledged for what they do and works, whether it's good or not. Like, this is part of cancel culture. And I've talked about this here on the program, and it's something we just can't go ahead and hide behind. When you're going into any bit of music, movies, TV, and radio, anything in the terms of broadcasting, you're going to be subjected to this if you become a big enough target. That's what happens here. That is what Dave Chappelle's going through again. And on this show, instead of just going through his normal set of maybe some new material, his new material is defending himself against all this criticism of what he's been going through in terms of talking about the LGBTQ community. I'm not part of that community. For me, it doesn't make a difference. There's some things that he said that I think could merit a discussion, but we can't debate and discourse now. It's impossible. It's not accepted. It's not allowed. Whether you like it or not, I don't care about politics anymore. I let that go. Okay? I'm a fence sitter. It doesn't matter to me what you think about this. That's not what the show's about. And if you do think that that's what the show's about, you can move on. The few listeners that might be listening in, don't look for me to go and give a political slant, because I'm not. What I am going to say is, in terms of those artists, those comedians, those musicians, those actors and actresses, performers, those that are entertaining, informing, or educating the public in whatever way they are, the influencers as well, you might as well say it is what it is, because that is the attitude I have now. Things are the way they are, and I'm not expecting to see any major changes to it, because in this country, it is a land of opportunity, but we know that people take opportunity for good and for bad. And what we also know is that people know that, they're allowed to go ahead and have their freedom of speech and their freedom of thought. And if they want to go ahead and cancel somebody out, it's allowed, right? That's all acceptable. And the other thing too is you can also not give a fuck. You can also don't give a fuck, DGAF. You can do that, and it doesn't make a difference. And some people probably just live better off not worrying about what's going on in the world and not following every trend that's out there, which is why I am a contender, a supporter of the organic mainstream, the crossover culture. When you see programming that's out there that everybody out there is expected to be sheep and follow along and say, oh, I love this. This is great. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be a brand name. It can be a show on Netflix or Apple. All right. For myself, I'm not a person that's going to go out of my way to go pick up Apple TV Plus and go watch Ted Lasso. I never had an interest in it. I more or less get the plot. I'm not watching it. Squid Game? No, I'm not watching it. Like, I understand people enjoying it. It's a mass, accepted, enjoyable thing. Sure. Listen, last weekend, I went to go see Many Cities in Newark. I made comments and I made a bit of a review on my When I'm Not Podcasting channel, which I'll say, as more stories are coming out to kind of complete and connect the dots as to what was going on, you really have to go into the Many Cities in Newark movie really understanding what happened on Sopranos, kind of getting a little bit of a refresher course of what happened to make sense of what they were trying to portray and what was being done. But there's a lot of criticism and a lot of mixed reviews on what happened, and I talked about that on my When I'm Not Podcasting channel. Everybody watched Venom at my movie theater, and justifiably so. It made a whole lot of money. Sure. But that's not what I was going to watch. Now, this weekend, I'm actually going to watch a movie that most people are going to watch, which is Bond. James Bond and No Time to Die, which I've been really chomping at the bit to watch and kind of just getting upset every time we had to go and see the date of the movie had to get moved. The release they keep pushing around, which really sucked. But now we're here, and when it comes down to what's been going on, Venom did very well. $90 million in the box office. It beat up what Shang-Chi did in its original first week. So, yeah, doing just fine. The theaters are kicking ass, which I talked about a couple weeks. Actually, I talked about last week. And so we go. October, kicking off to a good start. Love it. Wonderful. And a lot of theaters are going to be holding on to it as well. 4,407 theaters or screens are going to be watching the James Bond movie this weekend. A whole lot of showings about the movie theater. I'm looking forward to it. Now, back to what I was talking about. When you have to worry about this other underlying thing, which is when you become public, when you cross that ceiling to become popular or to get some kind of either micro influencing or macro influencing, or if you are a micro star and you have a bit of a base of people that listen to you and they love what you're doing or they watch what you're doing, yeah. With the popularity comes the possible negativity, comes the backlash, because there are going to be people that will not be happy to see you succeed and those that will. And there's obviously an agenda by Hollywood and others about what shows you should be watching and enjoying that should be massively praised and approved. All the network shows should expect that. But people in America, they determine what they want to watch. So there's a lot of offerings out there that you think network TV, they know what they're doing. Cable television, they think they know what they're doing. And nobody's watching because they're all going to streaming. And so a lot of shows there might not even be American-made shows. They're watching over on Netflix. And, Squid Game's not the first one. The heist show, what is it called? Money Heist. That's a popular show with Spanish subtitle, among others. So you could just look at that and say to yourself, hey, people are crossing the lines about what they want to watch. They'll find their entertainment. If the radio stations are not doing their job of selecting the music and the playlist that really caters to the mainstream public, then people will go to streaming. So what happens in this country is that technology dictates where people go. They move along to other places. Once, MySpace went away, here comes Facebook and Twitter. Once Facebook kind of fades away a little bit, TikTok comes into play, Instagram. But Facebook then will buy certain companies. That's them. So when they're failing and they can't get their own shit in order, then they need to go and buy something else, which is what the media companies do. Well, if their own major properties like ABC or Disney are not doing well, let's get Disney Plus. Let's go buy the Marvel library. Let's buy the Star Wars library. Let's then get the things that people do like and spend top dollar on it. No matter the consequences, no matter how hard it's going to be to keep their subscriber base up and the risk they're putting on it, no matter the lawsuits, which I talked about on one of my podcasting about the Marvel movies and the copyright agreements that have to be done in terms of being able to go ahead and hold on to the likeness and the usage of characters, say like a Spider-Man or an Iron Man, based on the original people that were part of the project that can still take claim as being part of the estate of said characters. You got that going for you. But now into the Dave Chappelle story, because the latest thing now is this. And Dave Chappelle, whether you like him or not, what he is doing now is he doesn't give a fuck. At this point, that's what you have to be. That's the mindset you're going to have if you feel like you can go along. And you have to hope that what you're saying and what you're doing and what your performance is going to overcome anything can be said. Now, cancel culture has been able to go ahead and do some things. Now, there have been things that have been done for good. The Me Too movement, yeah, it put a spotlight. But then it gets corrupted and it goes bad. So something that might start off with good intentions does go bad. Isn't it always how it goes? So I'm going to take for the New York Post that is talking about critics calling to cancel Dave Chappelle. This is so not new. I'm surprised I haven't talked about it myself, but, here we are. Oh, actually, no, I have. When he was on that show with Little Nas X. Oh, it's Kevin Hart. Sorry. No, Dave Chappelle I have not brought up. But here he is. Netflix is being criticized as well. So it's really not so much Dave Chappelle. I mean, Dave Chappelle is going to stick to his guns no matter what. That's what he did. But the Netflix, the audacity, the ignorance, the stubbornness, the money grubbing of Netflix of all places that wants to go ahead and let this transphobic comedian on, for ridiculing trans people. And then the stories coming out about the particular showrunner that we'll talk about in a minute that decided to go ahead and drop out of working with Netflix going forward. Okay, let's just go along under the story. Rob Bailey Mulatto at New York Post writes now, the always outspoken stand-up comic is pushing the public's buttons again. A swelling of wave of culture critics and activist organizations calling for his brand new Netflix special to be yanked from the streaming giant's catalog. It's the sixth and final special in the Emmy winner's big bucks deal with Netflix that premiered Tuesday. Age 48, Chappelle is being accused of defending what many perceive to be problematic comments by rapper DaBaby and Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, as well as deflecting criticism he faced for cracking wise about the trans community in previous specials. Equanimity and sticks and stones. In the closer, Chappelle declares he's joining Rowling and Team TERF, the acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, and conflated rapper DaBaby's homophobic statements at a show over the summer with systemic racism. I don't think he was defending DaBaby. I think he used them as a joke. It's part of a joke. And DaBaby's got his own problems. And there's a difference between DaBaby and Dave Chappelle. Now, DaBaby has been well involved, and we know he's been very well chronicled with a record criminally. As Dave Chappelle said, he shot a man to death. He's had gun possession. He's had drug possession, I believe. He's got a lot of things that's happened to him. And when he got successful, when he really reached a peak by getting onto a mainstream record with Dua Lipa and including the song Levitating, hey, they decided, well, all the radio stations, we're not going to play that version anymore. And DaBaby might be heard in some urban radio stations right now, but the kind of press he was getting before, I mean, he still gets to put out records and they're still charting, but, for every time he goes back out and tries to perform, there's always going to be some kind of cloud of controversy with him. So DaBaby will not get the kind of mainstream prowess that was getting before. So he's going to just have to stick to his lane in the urban sector, and that's it. So he'll be just a rap artist without a crossover ceiling to break again, and that's it. But I don't know if that really hurts his career. But what they did to him, I mean, listen, even Dave Chappelle said it was egregious. And I said, yeah, a big mistake. He opened his big fat mouth and he said some shit that he was going to get criticized for. And rightfully so. Hey, I mean, he also doubled down. Hey, look, you're going to get messed up for that. They're going to attack you for it. Why do you even say it? I mean, it was not provoked. Nobody really said anything, and he wasn't confronted by that. He wasn't put into a trap. He said it by himself. So it's going to be considered transphobic. It can be considered whatever. And that's it. Now, moving along. Chappelle says on stage, in our country, you could shoot and kill an N-word, but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings. referring to a 2018 shooting incident involving the rapper at a Walmart in Northern Carolina. And the 19-year-old victim later died. The brewing backlash is ample. Perhaps most shocking is the reaction from one of Netflix's own, Jacqueline Moore, executive producer and showrunner of the streaming giant's Dear White People. She declared herself done with Netflix. On Twitter, she wrote, "I love so many of the people I've worked with at Netflix, brilliant people and executives who've been collaborative and fought for important art. But I've been thrown against walls because I'm not a real woman. I've had beer bottles thrown at me, so Netflix, I'm done." Prior to that, she says, "I will not work with them as long as they continue to put out and profit from blatantly and dangerously transphobic content." Well, we know people don't want to, it's just, there is a selectivism. There might be content you don't like, that it doesn't benefit you. But because the door's been opened for you to go ahead and ridicule and to try to be able to take somebody out, because words actually can hurt somebody and hurt somebody's career, then let's just do it. It wasn't like that for 100 years of Hollywood. And Hollywood cannot be, for the fact that Hollywood is turning sanctimonious now, says everything about everything. Okay? Hollywood has their own end of racism, transphobia, issues with gay and lesbians and all that. Like, we know the kind of things that have been put out there that's been portrayed. We know how studio executives handled and how actors and actresses that might have to keep themselves under quiet wraps or in the closet, if you will. Listen, I don't think it was ever right that some of these actors, actresses, and entertainers had to be in the closet. The fact that they all get to go and come out and they have their moment, yeah, go for it. Rock on. Like, we shouldn't have that kind of problem anyways. But then also, you can't expect people to think that you can just put your agenda because now you're out. And then, you know what? Some people might not really be welcome or subjected to. We want to be subjected to LGBTQ content. Maybe they don't want their kids to be seeing it. Just because it might be part of everyday society. It's not everyone that's looking at it. It's not everyone that has to succumb to that. It's not anything that should be considered wrong. But it's also, people have their own lives to live. Let them do that. Do not inject what you think is right into somebody else's mind. It doesn't matter. It's just the fact that there are certain entities out there, whether it's media or activist organizations or whatever, that are going to propel and they're going to profit themselves from taking advantage of people that feel like they've been disenfranchised, that they feel like they've been offended. And they will go ahead and they'll use the power being given, because it's not like some of these organizations I feel like might necessarily care. I mean, if I wanted to go and start listing organizations that I think they supposedly are trying to do goodwill, I don't think they are. I feel like there are a lot of companies that just, therefore, they might be non-for-profit, but they're profiting anyway. And their agenda at the very top of a company, the executives within, there might be quite a few of them that probably don't even want to, they probably don't even care about the mission or the goals being set by said organization or what they support. They're just going along with it because it will make them money. Okay? The same way politicians work with lobbyists, all right? So they'll take a certain agenda if there's money in it, because that's the way this country works. Even when you talk about capitalism being a bad thing, well, there's other ways that people can go ahead and profit without it being capitalism. It's just like the stock market. Hey, you want to go ahead and rig the stock market so that the rich get poor? It's not going to happen. The rich is going to get rich anyway because they know how to play the game. They'll play it both ways. And there are also people in power that will play it both ways. That's just the way it is. Because of the credibility, the criteria, everything that goes behind Jacqueline Moore and her decision, that's becoming a headline. Why? Because the press wants to make it a headline. Now, we haven't seen Jacqueline Moore actually go ahead and cancel her contract with Netflix. I haven't heard that yet. She's made a public announcement. But has she actually stopped It's just a reference. It's just something to be said. It's on Twitter. And, you know, there's one thing that Dave Chappelle I do agree with. Yeah, Twitter's not real people. He's absolutely right. Quite a few things. There were a handful of things that he actually said that I thought, you know, were accurate. You might not like it, but it is accurate. Another organization, the National Black Justice Coalition, a civil rights advocacy group focused on the LGBTQ community, goes so far to prod Netflix to pull the closure from its menu. All right. So you want to have the National Black Justice Coalition. I haven't heard anything about this coalition. I haven't heard anything about them supporting the LGBTQ community. I mean, does anybody want to go ahead and do any fact-finding as to what kind of support they've actually done instead of lip service? Like, what actual money, what services have they given? Like, what have they actually done? Action over words. So the executive director, David John, said in a statement at Deadline.com, with 2021 on track to be the deadliest year on record for transgender people in the United States, the majority of whom are black transgender people. Okay, that's why they're saying that. Netflix should know better. Perpetuating transphobia perpetuates violence. Netflix should immediately pull the closure from its platform and directly apologize to the transgender community. And most importantly in cancel culture, the victory is in the apology. If you get the apology, you win. And for whatever reason, this is the one issue that anybody that's in entertainment or anybody in public, how many times do I have to refer to Tom Likas again and again and again? Don't do anything you have to apologize for. You need to be able to go and be on track and be aware and cognizant of what you're doing, saying, whatever, so that you never have to apologize. And how many people do we see that are not paying attention to what they say and they have to apologize or they're forced to apologize? And then even the apology is going to be criticized and ridiculed and be analyzed as well. Oh, it's not sincere. Oh, it's just a written statement. There's no emotion behind it. They're not doing anything behind it either. Right. Exactly. Apologies in some cases right here, it's to make somebody feel good. It's to make feel, oh, well, then you're doing something, you're humbling them. And then the ones that are apologizing, they also have to go through sensitivity training. Then you have to also go through other issues. Whether you're now being put in a public eye, like you're going through rehab. You look like a 12-stepper. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? But you go through the 12-step program because you have done something wrong. You have a problem you're trying to fix that is legitimately a problem. But, people don't really worry about that. The press doesn't care. It's a story. The editors, the publishers, they need to keep their lights on. They need to get themselves fed and paid. And to be damned with their staff. They're going to force them to go around, or else they'll have to apologize for their gross negligence or inferior work. Right? All of that. And of course, if you're going to talk about LGBTQ plus advocacy, GLAAD has also called out the acclaimed comics pattern of degrading jokes, declaring Chappelle's brand has become synonymous with ridiculing trans people and other marginalized communities. And so there's that. Reps for Chappelle on Netflix have so far declined to comment. Officially the negative buzz. The comic did address the LGBTQ community indirectly in the closer, saying he harbors no hate for them. Quote, "Oh, I'm jealous. I'm not the only black person that feels this way. We look at the gay community, we go, God damn it, look at how well that movement is going. Look at how well you're doing. And we've been trapped in this predicament for hundreds of years. How the fuck are you making that kind of progress?" However, Chappelle goes on to claim that there's a big difference between the old school gangsta guys who fought for change during the Stonewall era. I'm not that fond of these newer gays. Too sensitive, too brittle. Those aren't the gays I grew up with. They fought for their freedom. I respect that shit. And there's something to be said about that, because when you have minorities that are absolutely given the voice now, or said to be given the voice, and are be given opportunities. My thing is, and I still come to the conclusion here, I don't want opportunities given to me out of pity. Oh, because I feel sorry for somebody. I don't want that. And if you're out there, regardless of race, creed, culture, ethnicity, I hope you don't feel that way either. Do you want a handout? Do you want a gift? Do you feel like you haven't done anything for? Is there something wrong with earning, working hard, and making something? Without needing to say, oh, it's because you're this, you're that. No, it's because you're talented. It's because you're educated, you're smart, you are important. You affect a lot of people. But nobody talks about that. This is why, and the thing is, it's not worth it these days. In 2021 and going forward, it's not worth the fight. All I'm laying out right now is where things should be, which it's not. We should all know by now. Well know by now that that's not going to change. There's no groundswell that's going to change this kind of momentum right now. So the only thing you do is you don't debate. You don't discourse. Don't give a fuck. Apologize for all the bad language tonight, but, you know, we're talking about Dave Chappelle. We're talking about issues that are important here. And so you have to just keep in mind that this is what's brought on. Everybody just realizes it's not worth the fight. What you got to do is make sure from the get-go you do not put yourself in a spot where you have to apologize. And when people want to go ahead and start putting you down, you got to brush it off. You got to find a way. You got to find a support system. You got to find some way to overcome overwhelming odds. But if you do, that says a lot about you. Because if you're able to go and come through, and like myself, all right, I am trying to get the YouTube feed going. I am working my ass off to get subscribers on that damn channel. And you know what? I'm at 155. I'm pretty proud of that. At least I've been getting some subscribers there. I found some things. I get once in a while, I get an episode that might come up on the YouTube channel that gets some downloads. Hell, the Broadcasters Podcast, the BTS episode, for some reason, that did well. For what it's worth, I could put a couple of pennies together a day in terms of ad revenue that put something towards this program. And you know what? Hey, am I getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands listening to all of my programming? Am I getting people banging on my door trying to get me for podcasting service? Me, King of Podcasts, doing almost 15,000 hours of programming? No. But I like pushing the ball up the hill. I don't concern myself with, oh, I need to have all these things in front of me because I deserve it. Okay. For myself, you know, I'm 45. I have no kids. I've never been married. I'm single. And I just learned about, you know, not wanting to have to go and do things or have things the way they should be. Like, I'm not a kid that I think, oh, I should be talented. I should be on television. I should be on radio. I should be doing this. I'm a good actor. I can do voiceovers. I can do impressions. No. But that's how some people actually act. They act like children. Because they think, oh, well, then I do this or this because I'm a kid. Basically, I'm immature. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing or what I'm saying. Like, you know, there's some people that just don't take the time. You know, when it comes to the career, now it's one thing for somebody that's working hard and making money, because money matters to some people, to a lot of people. A lot of people I know, especially my family, people are hard workers, they're earners, or they do what they need to do to get the job done and earn their keep. And they don't care about adulation or praise or saying, oh, you did a great job, you're employee of the month. No. Nothing like that. You know what? If I work the hours, you pay me. If I work overtime, you pay me bonuses, time plus. That's what you get. So some people work and operate that way. They'll earn what they get. And then some people, because they chose not to be educated, they chose not to, make something of themselves, they decided to go ahead and take the easy route, which you can do. And many people do. It could be nepotism. It could just be where your social climate is, the environment that you were raised. All that could be considered as well. But, how many times do you hear about an entertainer or musician or whatever that came from nothing, that nothing was given to them, and they overcame? How many stories have we heard of that? How many times do we have to hear that of different people that are, biographically depicted? Right? Wasn't that long ago that we had Aretha Franklin? She didn't come from any. The background was completely different as well. And look at amazing star, Grammy Awards to the wazoo, amazing artist, 6 decades over, right? Well, actually 5 decades. But either which way, you see, there are role models. Our role models are people that work damn hard to get to where they are. Comedians today, they will look up at Dave Chappelle because he came from nothing and made something of himself. Plus the fact that when you get that successful, when Dave Chappelle at the peak, doing the Chappelle show, said, I'm done. I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to go somewhere else. He took time off because he could do that. Late 2000s, early 2010s, I still see clips on TikTok that are all about what Chappelle had on a Chappelle show. Like, you can't get away from hearing, it's Rick James, bitch. And nobody was thinking about canceling him back then. Nobody was even thinking about this kind of thing because this is all festered now. Because more and more, the people that are entitled, they have been entitled. They've gotten more entitled. And now, the large cadre of society, the powers that be, whether it's in entertainment, whether it's in politics, whatever else, they're feeding into the entitlement hunger that the entitled have. But how many of those have you seen been successful and been able to make something of themselves that do well? And it's not because you have something that might have a large platform and all of a sudden, okay, because some people are just giving it because it's just generated like that. It's just contrived. But the real success stories that we see are the ones that came from nothing, or came from somewhere, even if it might have been successful or rich, or they might have come from good upbringings, whatever. If they're getting into a field, whatever career it might be, and they made something of themselves, when the odds were against them, we praise those stories. Those stories still get praised. They still get honored. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter race, creed, persuasion. It doesn't matter any of it. So for people out there that are content creators, it is what it is. Just realize we're going to be dealing with this for the rest of our lives. The rest of our careers, you have to be careful of what you do. You're going to go all the way and go 180 miles an hour, and you're going to do what you want to do and don't give a fuck. Stick with it. Make sure it's not something you have to apologize for. Just go for it. Why not? I mean, those are the people that do well. And it's obvious that with online, with digital disruption, you don't need the mainstream to be successful. You can go on digital, you can go on stream, you can do whatever you want and become successful. You don't have to play by all the rules that are being put out when the rules are rigged against you. So just keep that in mind. I want to take a couple of things from this Dave Chappelle story that I thought would be important to bring up as well. One story I looked at, there's two other stories from Vulture and from Paste I want to take from. So let me quickly go into those. Vulture talked about the comedy review. And in the story, the writer here, Craig Jenkins, writes in the second paragraph, Dave Chappelle is a master of pressure point work, of transgressing towards profundity. He isolates absurdities we take for granted. He shakes out some of the comforts of our conditioning. He asks why we take what we've been taught about the world at face value, and why don't we just come up with a framework that fits us better? You know who sounds like that? George Carlin was exactly that way. And people still, when you look at where things are today, and, you know, George Carlin has long passed, but that guy was a genius. Well, a lot of what he says rings true today. We could use a guy like George Carlin right now. Sketch comedy was the perfect setting for Chappelle's ruminations about race and class. In his Netflix specials, they've devoted so much time pointing out that Chappelle no longer cares if you understand or appreciate his intentions. Now, he talks about in this story that the closer is very funny early on. The closer wants you to know that Dave Chappelle does not hate the women and queer folks and other minorities he has poked fun at in his 6 stand-up specials. It also wants you to know that he hates having to say this. What it seems the comic wants is license to be an equal opportunity offender, to have it known there's no malice in his jabs. He wants the old thing back, the freedom to be crass without having it reflect negatively on his character. But he's come back to a world where faith in the goodness of famous people is understandably diminished in the wake of 1,000 scandals of every type. And the audience has avenues to take their displeasure with a gaffe or off-color remark directly to the source. The party line among comics of this era has been that everyone takes themselves too seriously now, and it's their job to shake us out of it. That makes a lot of sense to me. And when you think about it, the other thing I always talk about when it comes to people is also like, if somebody can dish it, you should be able to take it. So one thing I learned when I was growing up, not too long ago, there was a point where I got a little bit sensitive about, my family would go ahead and we always are a bunch of jokesters. Like everybody picks on everybody, and people can get little, we make our jokes, we make our things, we say stuff. It's poking fun, as Dave Chappelle says. And it took me a while to realize, there was a while that I did take things a little bit seriously, and I got a little sensitive about it. And I realized, you know what? I have to be able to go in, not just dish it, but I got to be able to take it. So I got to be able to go ahead and lash back. And I really got myself to realizing I need to go back and do that more. It is what it is attitude that I'm trying to really stick to and understand. And when it comes to everything, it is what it is. And people just have to really be understood of that. Chappelle wants to be the best for everyone, he explains. Quote, I am not indifferent to the suffering of someone else. He just feels everyone is handling themselves foolishly. His jokes about the Me Too movement in 2019, Sticks and Stones, were about filling the campaign centers, wealthy women, and ineffectual protest gestures. His jabs at gay men were only meant for the ones who co-opt the language of black outrage, then retreat into whiteness when threatened. He objects to the charge of transphobia. He's merely, quote, interested in the gender construct personally. What's frustrating on the surface as the closer is the sense that Dave wouldn't have to say any of this if he expressed an ounce of chill in the 5 specials before it. The sense that there's an alternate timeline where the GOAT didn't spend any of the last 5 years fishing for outrage and could use this hour in 2021 to trying to figure out what the hell is going on out here. Instead, we're preoccupied with cleaning up old messes and creating new ones. It's hard for people to trust that you respect the queer community when you announce that you're Team TERF, making a point to mix up the letters, and LGBTQ, and pepper your work with the slurs your peers have largely hung up, when the reason you offer for easing off those kinds of jokes is the future is that you don't want to go out like J.K. Rowling, DaBaby, or Kevin Hart. In Chappelle's eyes, these are the examples of the mountain-moving power of LGBTQ rage. This framing ignores how each one's stubbornness in the face of backlash for the awful thing they said led to only more awfulness. How these are stories are refusing to budge when asked for a meager concession by fans who want to support how each one still sits on the same mountain of cash. You know what? You want the apology. There's no question. Even Craig Jenkins here wants the apology. Because there's a sensitivity. There's a sense of entitlement. Oh, he says something bad about me. He needs to apologize. Really? And look where you are now. Are you going to change? Are you going to mend fences? Are you going to fix what's broken? Are you going to live in harmony with Dave Chappelle if he apologizes to you? No, you're not. If Kevin Hart came back and said something, no, you're not. Do people go ahead and give the apology? People don't give a shit. Okay, the other DGAF, the apologies, once given, we don't give a fuck. We think the same way about you. We're going to cancel you anyway. So why even apologize? Yeah. Makes sense to me. Which is why I say it is what it is. This is a lesson for all of you content creators out there. Learn this lesson. If anything I tell you on this program, understand this and keep it in mind. Lock it in. And realize that there will be scrutiny. There will be backlash if you reach a certain point of stardom. Because some people feel like they're entitled to be just as successful as you are. Why are they so special? Why are they able to go and be stars and I'm not? Why is my daughter not the star? There's one thing for parents to go ahead and, praise their kids and say the best about their kids. But even kids and adults and we all have to realize, you know what? Sometimes we don't always win. Sometimes we lose, but it's the way we lose that we pick ourselves back up and we win after that. Life is a struggle. It's how you handle the struggle that makes the metal of who you are. And with guidance from the Almighty, that's how I live. And that's the way people should live. One other thing I'll take for the Dave Chappelle story I want to take as well, that I think is important, is another story from Pace Magazine talking about transphobia and cancel culture. Another opinion that also makes to a certain point, I thought would be good to point out. Seth Simon's in this story. Now, the article that here is published originally on Humorism, a news labor about labor inequality and extremism in comedy. The story starts, one way to understand the moral panic around cancel culture is as an elite fear of downward mobility. The members of a relatively small class, a vocal minority, observing that they no longer have control over their public image and therefore their saleability as public figures, suddenly perceive a threat to which they were previously immune, precarity. Thanks to evolving social mores and new forms of mass communication, they must now contend with the possibility that acting that they always have, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, abusive, might cost them even some silver of their position. So this story is trying to say that the minority are those people that are popular, that are in the public. But let's just be honest. The outcry by those that want to call out your racist, your sexist, your homophobic, your transphobic, your abusive, that is also a minority. Because they take their voice and amplify it because they say, well, there's the rest of this community that's got to also follow along and say, oh, well, we believe that too. But then there's people that are within a particular community that might not agree with what's being said, but because this is tribal nature, you're either with us or against us. It's a cliche, but it makes sense. Because the rich and famous enjoy disproportionate influence over the platforms where their ideas get discussed, they unfortunately manage to convince everyone else this is a huge problem. Platforms where ideas get discussed. They're talking about social media. Which social media, if you were looking for positive debate, discourse, critique, you're not going to get in social media. It's a cesspool of keyboard warriors that just want to go ahead and bring people down. Sometimes that's all it is. people that just want to troll, people that just want to take on their own outrage because they don't have to actually go in front of the real world and talk like the way they want to. They're just going to go behind a keyboard and just type away. Right? Brings up Louis C.K. I'm not going to bring that up. When they talk about Louis C.K., they said that most likely from his projects and deals, he probably lost about $35 million. And in the story, they say, in what sense does one suffer from the loss of $35 million? I suppose it must be that once you lose $35 million, you can no longer spend $35 million. But there's nothing essential in this world that only $35 million can buy. The sort of things one would spend millions of dollars on are, by definition, luxuries. I don't have $35 million. You don't have $35 million. Are we suffering? Now, Kevin Hart was brought up in the closer, and Kevin Hart, who dreamt so long of hosting the Oscars, not only does not host the Oscars. We know what happened with him and Lil Nas X, right? And he brought in $59 million in 2019 alone. There's an amnesia characteristic of people who get rich in creative industries where the asymmetry of talent and opportunity combined with the rampant systemic inequality means that success in a lottery win is a lottery win even if you're genuinely talented and work genuinely hard. It can be difficult to accept this, and many don't. Even if you're great, even if you've fought for everything you have, one doesn't earn million-dollar deals for prestigious national platforms. One is awarded by them a system so monumentally unjust that the whole thing is structured to conceal how unjust it is. Well, it can go the other way around, because then there are people that are awarded by a system that is also unjust. So both sides suck. Okay? Both sides are in the wrong. How do you like that? It is what it is. What you see in people like Dave Chappelle, people who see loss of future earning capacity as an existential threat, is faith in an order that doesn't actually exist. In the real world, there's no right to keep something just because you have it. In the real world, you can lose everything, be forced to adapt to change your life. These realities aren't always fair. They sometimes are, but they are realities the vast majority of us must live with. At a seething core, the cancel culture panic is people who live on clouds yelping at the lightest tug of gravity. The cruelest joke is that it's still all the gravity they'll ever feel. Now that last part I'm a little bit iffy about. The real world, there's no right to keep something just because you have it. You can lose everything, be forced to adapt to change your life. Well, how about adding the fact a little bit of, glass half full here, buddy? You could come back, lose everything, and come back again. So just don't think that, something's gone. For people to go and just live that money is everything, no, it's not. But that's a life lesson that people don't want to learn. They don't want to consider that. It's not for them. Now, I didn't think I was going to go so long on this Dave Chappelle story, but you know what? I had a lot to say about it. It just, and in the way I wanted to go and talk about it tonight, thought it was actually really important. One other story I want to bring up is, I had other stories I'm going to bring up. IATSC, they're in negotiations right now with the AMPTP, so they're back to the bargaining table, second day of negotiations. Nothing's been learned yet, so we're waiting on that. And there was more about the Hollywood Cruise and how they authorized a strike. I guess I'll bring that up if we're going to get to that. I'll just hold on to that. And I still have other stories I have not brought up yet, but I'm tabling those because eventually I'll have to get to them anyway. Or I'll just put them on when I'm on a podcasting show. I don't know. I'll figure it out soon enough. Now I'm going to go to an Ivy League collegiate story. The Daily Princetonian. Yep, that's what I'm saying. So this is the Princeton, New Jersey Princetonian that we know about. That's where I'm taking the story from. It's a story called Fuck Cancel Culture. Writer is Dylan Gallagher. A couple weeks ago wrote this. So here's a story that was brought up in this particular. So let's go and take a little recount that the Princetonian talks about. Amid an international reckoning over racial justice in December 2020, several hundred Princeton faculty signed a letter delineating university-wide changes. One professor offered criticism in the letter, faced serious condemnation, and published a piece about surviving cancellation at Princeton. Without dredging up the original debate, the events surrounding the letter certainly showcase a high-profile instance of cancel culture on our campus.
Returning to the campus this semester, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Princetonian, Emma Treadway, directed each of us to rethink our campus culture. In a lot of the directive, cancel culture seems the ideal tradition to tear down. We have to recognize cancel culture for how corrosive it is and understand the constructive principles that can replace it. Then we can commit ourselves to pursuing them despite how difficult it might be. I'm glad the colleges are thinking about this now. Although there are many understandings of the term, it is defined as building consensus around the idea that an individual should be shamed or the reputation, professional, personal, attacked for what is perceived as offensive behavior. Cancel culture has engulfed big names in American society from entertainment to literature and has become particularly salient to the nation's political discourse. It directly undermines both the message of tolerance you rightly uphold and the transformative policies you champion, which need broad-based support. Far from holding those it cancels accountable, cancel culture enables those conservatives who lack principle or policy to spew overtly offensive language, then decry legitimate criticism as another failed cancellation by the politically correct left. It's not a substitute for accountability, mainly because it does not carry any weight for those supposedly being held accountable. I want to read that again. I'll slow it down. Cancel culture is not a substitute for accountability, mainly because it doesn't carry any weight for those supposedly being held accountable. The reputations we build with among our peers, friends, and colleagues are our first real contribution to Princeton. If someone's cancellation is successful, it rids them of that contribution and therefore any real stake in our community. And employing cancel culture also creates another victim, real or imagined, the victim of cancellation, who might think their fall from grace was due to views they did not fully understand or opinions they had not fully formed. Moreover, if they happen to survive their cancellation and its after effects, they reap the benefits. At the core, these myths represent different degrees of the same problem, a lack of ownership in this community. We have to take the ownership in ourselves. Real accountability means taking responsibility for past failings in two ways. First, we have to recognize when we screw up and determine if those mistakes were intentional or accidental. Second, we have to understand that the failures of others are often a reflection of our own. When thinking about someone else's behavior, we need to offer them the space to fail and the grace to heal. This is difficult but not impossible. We can validate what someone thinks or does, if not totally, insofar as it is based on a valid life experience or opinion, not on some arbitrary intention to offend us. If they have intentionally offended us, we have to lean on imperfect institutions to get justice, which only become more legitimate when we build on them. We have to bring, I'm reading, falling a little bit farther down. We have to bring victim and offender together to effectively repair the harm done and build a path forward in what we are always going to be complex and painful situations. No. Before this, nobody tried this. So why even try to put two dissenting sides together? Sometimes they might be able to do that, but the truth is, no. People are going to be the way they are. Now, I would like to think there's not as much racism as there is in the country that might be portrayed or festered up by the media, but there is. And some people are much more vocal about it than others. And there's also tribal of mentality across various cultures, creeds, persuasions, personality traits. That's what the way it is. So we're not going to get people to go ahead and make up, all right? They always talk about this country being divisive. Well, it might not have been, there might have been a divisiveness well before all of this that people probably didn't even know about, except now, the news is just deciding to go ahead and just amplify it. It's probably already been there. But now it's got to be put out there, so everybody has to pick a side. Well, maybe I don't want to pick a side. Maybe I want to stay out of it. I'll stay out of the fight myself. I'll go ahead and work on what I'm going to work on. That's what matters to me. So there we go. Another hour on cancer culture in the books. I'm not surprised I was able to go and get through that again and just call it out. Because when I see that there is so much to be said about this and just where people could just look at what's going on. And there we go. Now, if you want to go ahead and look back at what I talked about before, you can go back to my August 6th episode where I went specifically about this. Yeah, go ahead and look back for my previous episode, Celebrity Crossfire and the Continuous Cancel Culture Circus. That was an episode I did that you can go ahead and check back out for yourself and find out what's going on with that. Episode 186, back in August 7th. Take a look at that for yourself, and you'll see where I came up with that as well. That was right around the baby issue at Rolling Loud that really got a lot of people talking. So it wasn't that long ago. It's only been 2 months. I can't believe time has flown by so fast. So there you go. That's going to be your Broadcasters Podcast for tonight. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening in, as you always do. And come back for another Broadcasters Podcast. Remember, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.